Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah, amma ba'd. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we pray to Him that He makes us among those who, inshallah ta'ala, learn beneficial knowledge and benefit from that which they learn and put it into practice, Ya Rabbil Alameen. To proceed, we're continuing our top 100 questions that every Muslim should know. Today is kind of a natural flow from last time, which was talking about what is the most important part of the human being, which is the heart. And then we talked about the importance of remedying the heart, etc. Today we will talk about arguably the most important part of the heart, which we alluded to last time. And so this is kind of a follow-up onto that, which is, what is character? And what's the difference between good character and bad character, and how can we develop that? It's a very broad question, but the idea is the topic of what is character, right? Character is the internal characteristics of the individual, of the human being, right? Just like there's outward characteristics, we don't call that character. The outward, the way that they look, their hair, their face, their height, their weight, etc. Character are all of those descriptions that apply to the inside, and nafs, right? To the human being on the inside. And this is important in following up on the heart, because all of these emanate from that heart. And if we want to understand ourselves and then consequently or subsequently understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we cannot do this unless we actually better our character. But we can't do this unless we hold a mirror to that character. So just like a person holds a mirror to themselves outwardly, I can see my clothes, I can fix my hair, I can do whatever it is that I need to do. Holding a mirror to that inner self is very difficult. And we can't do it unless we actually understand what it is, what it's there for, its purpose, all of these other things. So inshallah ta'ala, that's kind of what we are going to go over today, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Okay? Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells shaitan, says, "Inni khaliqun basharan min teen." I am going to create a human being from teen, from mud, clay. Then he says, فَإِذَا سَوَيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. And then when I create him, shape him, fashion him, and then blow into him from my soul. So here's the thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala attributes the soul, which is that inner self that we're talking about, to him, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But our outer self, our body, is attributed to mud, to clay. Which one is better? Which one is more honorable? The inner self, the soul, correct? But if that's the case, it is a sad problem that more people worry about that outer self than the inner self. They worry about how they look, they worry about the body and its needs, more so than the soul and the spirit and its needs. Right? The spirit was created for a purpose. It has certain characteristics. Its purpose, by the way, I'm getting ahead, but the purpose, by the way, of the spirit, of the soul, is to worship God purely. Right? To be in His obedience, to remember Him, dhikr. Which is why there are many people who outwardly, meaning in terms of their bodies are concerned, they have everything taken care of. They might eat healthy, work out, go to the gym, whatever it is, get exercise, all these things. Yet, despite all of this, and have as many riches, access to all these things, yet inside, they'll tell you, I feel like I'm empty. Spiritually, I'm hollow. I have a problem. I don't know what it is. Because the spirit isn't doing what it was created to do. The body, you fulfilled what it was created to do, but you haven't fulfilled what the spirit is there to do. Right? It's there for a higher purpose, it's there for something bigger, and unfortunately we don't understand this. طيب, a person might say, well, Sheikh, okay, that's all good. Can I change my inner self? So you're saying we need to fulfill its purpose. I have bad characteristics. Can I change those? The answer is yes. But what if a person says no, like they object to this? Can you fully change? Let's say your outer self, if we're making this example between the outer self and the inner self, right? The body, the physical, and the intangible, spiritual side of a human being. The outer self, can you change it? Some aspects, but not completely. Like you'll remain you. right? There are certain aspects that you can't really change. You know what I mean? But there are certain aspects that you can. You can start working out, going to the gym, you can bulk up, right? When somebody sees you now eating a lot, you just tell them, I'm bulking, right? This is the new fad, people are... You can bulk up, or you can cut down, you can do... These types of manipulations you can do to your body, your outer self, right? But ultimately, you're not changing who you are. You're still remaining the same. وَهَكَذَا Similarly is that inner self. We can shape it. We can take it to the gym, riyada, literally. So in a lot of these books, especially this one that I have in front of me, they call it riyadatun nafs. Literally, the word riyada, now modern Arabic, uses it for the word sports, athletics. But it's talking about the inner athleticism. Okay? That inner dimension of taking our spirit to the gym. Taking our soul to something that's the spiritual gym. Which is, if it was a physical place, it would be the masjid. Right? But we're talking about the constant exercise that we need to do for our inner selves. So here's the thing. That affects our behavior, our character, who we are to a degree. Those things can be worked on. You can train yourself to become better. There were people historically who denied this. And they said you can't change who you are. But the reality is you can better yourself. You can grow. You can't change the essence of who you are. Yes, that's correct. But you can become better. We can do this for animals. We can take a dog and train the dog, and the dog becomes better. We can train a horse, and the horse will do tricks. Did we change the essence of the horse? No. We just taught it something and it became better, at least for our purposes. If you can do that for an animal, then obviously a human being is much more honorable and much more better. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put every type of characteristic inside of us for a purpose. Which is why getting rid of them completely is not the goal. We'll give some examples. Hunger, desires, anger. These have a positive side and a negative side, correct? Without hunger, we would die. When I say hunger here, I mean craving food. There was a doctor who, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you all, Ya Rabbal Alameen, and your loved ones from this terrible illness. He got cancer of the mouth. Right? I'm sorry, did I say a doctor? He was a chef. Up in Chicago, he has a restaurant there, one of those fancy. But anyways, I listened to his NPR interview. He's a chef, and his whole job is to taste food and serve tasteful food. He got cancer of the mouth, lost his ability to taste, became suicidal because he couldn't taste the food anymore that he was actually serving, lost 100 pounds in 6 months because he wasn't eating enough. He says, the desire to eat was no longer there, which makes you think, do we eat because we actually need the food, or do we eat out of that, you know what I mean, like the chasing the flavor, the taste, etc., right? There's a hunger. That desire that Allah created in us functions for a purpose. Otherwise, we wouldn't actually eat. Same thing. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't create the desire to have children, nobody would have kids. Historically and probably even today. Like, it's there for a purpose. Anger, does anger have a good side? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ, and the ones who swallow or contain their anger. He doesn't say the ones who get rid of their anger, or the ones who have no anger. He says, وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ. Why? Because anger is actually necessary. Without anger, we wouldn't protect ourselves from the things that we need to protect ourselves from. We wouldn't. So it has a positive side and a negative side. Every characteristic that you can think of, these are just 3 prime examples. Every characteristic that we can think of, there's a positive side and a negative side, and a person can go to extremes in either, by the way. And a person can go to extremes in too much anger, too little anger. Too much desire for food, too little desire for food. Too much desire for procreation, too little desire for procreation. Both extremes are bad. And this is why balance is the goal. And balance leads, a balanced life is like you're walking on a bridge, a sirat. This is why the many scholars have said that when you are balanced, you're on that straight path in terms of your character. Inshallah ta'ala, you are on the straight path that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for you. And you will be able to pass that sirat, the bridge, the straight path on the Day of Judgment as well. right? Even generosity. Is there a positive and a negative side? Can I go too much generosity, too little? Too little, stinginess. But too much, and a person becomes almost indebted. One of the companions, without mentioning names, did this. I'll mention his name, Mu'adh ibn Jabal, radiallahu anhu. Great companion, huge companion. He was under the misconception that if I give in donation, Allah will replace me tenfold. So you know what he did? He went and took out loans in order to give without any, he didn't have any source of income, he didn't have a job, a very basic job, hoping that it'll be replaced because I'm giving it in charity. And he's taking people's wealth and giving it out in charity, literally on loan, on debt. Eventually the debtors came to collect. There's nothing to collect. The guy doesn't have anything. He only has his house, etc. And so eventually, I don't know if you guys know this, the Prophet ﷺ, and this is where we get the rulings of bankruptcy from. In Islam, Islamic bankruptcy is that the Prophet ﷺ allowed the debtors to actually sell all of his stuff. Hujir ala mali, like literally he was prevented from his own wealth. They even sold his house and repaid the people that he borrowed money from. And because after he became homeless, so the Prophet ﷺ eventually sent him to Yemen. And that famous thing, to give da'wah. I mean, it was a good opportunity for him anyways. But he sent him to Yemen. One of the reasons was because of this incident. And then of course there's that sad moment where he sends Mu'adh to Yemen. And he tells him, "Oh Mu'adh, you're going to come people of the book. That the first thing that you teach them is the shahada. And if they do this, then teach them about prayer. If they do this, teach them about zakah." And then at the very end of this hadith that a lot of people don't realize, he says, "Perhaps you might go, and when you come back, you will not find me. I won't be alive." And Mu'adh says, "What?" He says, "Yes." But he says, "If you come, then give salam to me in my grave." This is where this is one of the proofs for the sunnah of visiting the grave of the Prophet ﷺ and giving him salams, etc. And this is in fact what happened. When Mu'adh went to Yemen, he got news that the Prophet ﷺ passed away, so he goes back to Medina, and we know the sad story. Anyways, all of this was to say, too much generosity can be problematic. Can you be too generous? Yes. When the Prophet ﷺ told Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, when he was sick, Sa'd wanted to give away half of his wealth in charity. He says, "I only have one daughter." He says, "Don't. Don't give away your money." First off, the Prophet ﷺ had the foresight to know he's not going to die. Now he was really sick, but he wasn't going to die then. And at the time, Mu'adh only had one daughter. Eventually, when Sa'd, we're on Sa'd now. When Sa'd passed away, he had 17 kids. When he actually passed away. But at the time, he only had one daughter. And he figured, like, one daughter, how much does she need? I have a lot of wealth, she doesn't need that much. But the Prophet said, no, hold on to your wealth, number one. Number two, don't give that much. He says, okay, what about a third? He says, a third, and a third is a lot. He wanted to give away 2/3, it went down to a half, it went down to a third. This is why, by the way, many scholars, many even companions like Abdullah ibn Abbas and Ibn Umar, both of them said, because the Prophet ﷺ still said it's a lot, we prefer to give a fourth if a person wants to give in charity, meaning on their deathbed. While they're alive, you're healthy, you can give more if you want to, if there's a need, etc. But generally you shouldn't, you know what I mean, just to leave some for the inheritors, etc. And like again, you can be too generous. And this is why I told Sa'd, don't. And so Sa'd held on to his wealth and only gave away a third. And then subhanAllah, he was actually, he lived actually much longer than that. He lived for another almost 40 years after that incident. Yeah. طيب. If we're talking about character and we want to remedy character, then understanding what we can in terms of physical health, we can apply it to spiritual health. So, first off, we have to diagnose the problem and then give it the proper medicine. Usually the proper medicine when it comes to spirituality is by the opposite of what our nafs is usually inclining to. So this is one of the first steps in showing ourselves the mirror, right? So you have a mirror to see the physical self. The mirror for the inner self is through basira, not basar. Basar is sight. Basira is insight. Look inside. So one of the techniques, there's many. There's actually a number of techniques that we'll go over inshallah ta'ala. One of them is looking at what is my inclination and why. And then doing the opposite usually. Why do I want this? Now, some people took this to an extreme where they said, whatever my nafs inclines to, I'm going to do the opposite to teach it, to train it. Right? So he would be like, to the extent where, if I'm craving an apple, I refuse to eat an apple, I will eat an orange. In order to tame the cravings that he has. Right? This isn't necessarily correct. Let's just put it that way. That's an extreme version, because now I should look at the why. Why is my nafs craving the apple? There might actually be something beneficial in the apple that it's actually seeking. Right? So by the way, in food and nutrition, a lot of times if you do crave a food, I've heard this from a nutritionist, I don't know how true it is to be honest, but they were telling me that usually when you crave a food, especially if it's a natural occurring food, that's usually an indication that your body is lacking whatever nutrition is in that particular food. Right? Like if a person is craving like spinach, right, or something along those lines. Although people usually don't get these types of cravings anymore, right? We were eating so much processed food, we don't even know what spinach tastes like anymore. But I'm just saying in general, I mean, it's an indication that they might be deficient in iron or something else. وهكذا. So when we look at what are you craving, we should ask the question, why am I craving it? Because it might be good. Now the opposite is true. If I let's say for example, a person has an inclination to fulfill the desires sexually, let's say. He should think, why? Is this naturally occurring or is there something else going on? Right? And then figure out, is that something to be pursued or not? What am I craving? Or let's say the opposite. What is my nafs inclining to? The nafs will incline towards sleep. طيب, is this the time for sleep? No. Okay, why am I sleepy? Right? Let's say Fajr time. I'm inclining, you can, you know what I mean, bet money that you're going to incline towards sleep at Fajr time. But ask, why am I inclining to sleep? Which is better? Right now I need to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وهكذا. So you should look at the why, look at the circumstances, look at actually what's going on. This takes an awareness of the person. Sometimes it takes some self-discipline. And it takes small steps to remedy these things. A lot of times, and so one of the techniques in this is to not do everything all at once. So just like a person when they go to the gym, you know, people who have no experience with the gym, for a physical gym, and they start lifting the heaviest weights they can find, what's going to happen to them? Injury, burnout, you're going to be sore, you're not going to go to the gym for another week. You kind of ruined it for yourself. Instead, what should you do? Start slowly. Shwaya, shwaya. Slowly, slowly. And you'll get better. If I'm having trouble staying on top of my 5 daily prayers, slowly, slowly, you'll get over them. If I'm having trouble praying tahajjud, I'm having trouble fasting, nawafil, I'm having trouble doing I'm having trouble with I'm getting angry. Little by little. You're not going to get over your anger issues overnight. You're not going to get over your hunger issues overnight. It takes little by little discipline. Like I said, self-awareness, and understanding it that way. Okay? We talked about balance. We talked about there's a wisdom behind every characteristic that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put inside of us. Another thing that happens is that when we do things slowly, slowly, eventually we will learn to love what it is that we're disciplining ourselves with. So just like you have people that are like what, gym rats? Is that the proper term? They did not become that type of person overnight. Nobody was born in the gym. Nobody was born liking the gym either. But these people eventually love it. Same thing to the people who come to the masjid. If you look at it, initially when people first coming to the masjid, did they like it? It was tough for many people. It was hard for many people to get that self-discipline, because you're going out of your way. If a person was used to, for example, at night during Isha time, watching a TV show, and he's like, no, I'm going to give that up and I'm going to go to the masjid. That's tough. That's a transition. You're giving up something for something else. Initially, going to the masjid is not going to be as rewarding. But with that discipline, weeks, months, years, wallah, you couldn't pay that person money to go and watch a TV show versus coming to the masjid. You couldn't. You tell him, hey, sit down, watch this. He's like, what is this? I'm not going to watch. Even though he might have done that 10 years ago. But khalas, he's like so now used to it that actually now he sees the sweetness of it. He knows it. He's disciplined. Similarly, all these different characteristics. Like we said, anger, desire, hunger. It could be, you know what I mean, generosity, little by little. So if a person, self-evaluation. If I find that I enjoy gathering money, I should ask why. Is it for a desire of the dunya? Is it because of what I'm doing with it? Is it because that self-evaluation? And then do the opposite. That doesn't mean not gathering as much, but not to have that desire to, and to try to protect yourself from it. If I know that, for example, I like to accumulate it and not give it, then I should do the opposite, because I'm asking why. Now if you're saving like for a rainy day fund, okay, mesh, that's fine. But if I'm just saving, there are people who literally enjoy just the act of saving, right? There was a lady, she's like, my husband, first thing he does in the morning, logs onto his bank account and looks at the number. First thing in the morning. He's not praying, he's not doing, literally he looks at his bank account and at the number, and it brings him joy. Actual physical. He's just like, what? Okay? And he won't let her see it. She says, I didn't see it. I didn't see the number. And he was stingy. Like when he would give her money, he would count cash and even by the penny. He was like, I calculated how much tax would be, and here's a few extra pennies if I'm wrong. By the penny. Mish, yani not by the dollar. Like that much when she's going to the store to buy. Ada, are you serious right now? Fast forward, the guy dies, passes away. She finds out that this guy almost had close to $1 million sitting in the account. But that accumulating brought him joy. He didn't spend it on himself. Like that wasn't joy. Like if you're buying a big screen TV, no joy for him in that. Aslan, it was probably a nightmare. He's thinking about how much it would cost. But having it sit there brought him a lot of joy. So we should look, why does it bring me joy? And like, what brings me joy and why? And then I need to see if this is something I need to remedy. What should bring me joy, if we're Muslims, submitters to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is anything that Allah commands us to do. But that's a high level. To get to that level, where we find genuine joy in the acts of worship. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ did. He says, جُعْلَتْ قُرَّةُ عَيْنِي فِي الصَّلَاةِ. The comfort. I find my comfort when I pray. That's a high level, right? So we have to try to kind of get to that level, right? And figure out. So first, self-awareness. Okay. Evaluate. Ask intentions. Why? Why am I doing this? Why do I enjoy this? Why do I like this? Why am I inclined? Why do I get angry? Why am I stingy? But I have to know that. So how can I know that I have these things? I need a good friend, which is number 2. So step number 1, self-awareness. Step number 2, having a good friend. A good friend is not just someone who will bring you a smile or invite you to his house. A good friend is a person who will give you good advice, have your back, genuinely, not trying to put you down or to show that he's better or smart or anything like this, and tell, hey, look, I want to share something with you. Hey, sometimes he'll mention it in passing, like knowing he doesn't want to make a big deal out of it. Sometimes that's the best way. And that's why Abu Bakr Siddiq, Umar radiallahu anhu, both of them, and many other companions, these are just the prime examples, they would say, may Allah bless the one who gifts us our faults. He tells us what's wrong with us. But He gifts us. Why does He use the word gift? Because it's like He's giving you a present. He's being gentle with it. He's not throwing it in your face. He's like, here you go, here's your gift. Hey, when you said this. The other day, yeah. Anyways, good friend. Self-awareness. Muraja'atun nafs. Right? Looking at people around him, not with the intention of judging them, but of them being a reflection of himself. If I can't see myself, I can at least see what other people are going through. You understand what I'm saying? It's like for those flat earthers. The prime example on how we know that the earth is not flat. I mean, there's so many. But one of the funny ones, I'm sorry, and if I'm offending anybody who is a flat earther, but when you look, it's like all the planets in the solar system are round and planets. You know what I mean? My kids asked me the question, like, Baba, how do we know that the earth is round? I said, so imagine, Baba, that you live in a world where there's no mirrors. And there's people all around you. There's no way for you to see yourself, but you see all the people are round. And then you would look to yourself and be like, no, I'm different. I'm going to be flat. That would be impossible. That would be ridiculous. Of course, I'm going to be like everybody else. Ultimately, we should, when we look at and we see bad characteristics on other people, we should assume that we have those as well and evaluate whether I have them. Not to judge them, we should give them advice, but we should also use them as mirrors. Like, man, I don't like it when this guy, does this and this or says this and this. Wait a second, do I do this as well? Man, maybe I should stop that. You understand what I'm saying? So number 3 is using the people as mirrors, that we know and we can evaluate them through them. Number 4, the last one is having access to a good teacher. And this is the last because it's the one that's the most difficult to find. And unfortunately, in this day and age, it can be exploited, and it has been exploited. In fact, there are people who will put this at number 1, meaning to have a teacher where it's almost blind allegiance to that teacher, to the point where whatever he says I have to do. Whatever he commands me, like he says, get married, I'll get married. He says, don't get married, I won't get married. And there are people in this day and age who I know personally who told me I didn't get married because my sheikh told me not to get married. I was like, how could he say that, Yakhi? Why? Oh, so I can serve the deen. Okay, you can serve the deen, but why? My sheikh saw something, and the sheikh never explained why. La. But this is not even the sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ, whenever he would recommend something, he would always say why. Especially something along these lines. Now, if you have no desire to get married, I understand that. That's fine. Right? If a person comes and says, I don't want to get married, okay, balash, you don't have to. But if a person wants to get married, and then the sheikh tells him, no, this is, in my mind, in my opinion, highly problematic. And like I said, this has been exploited in our modern times, but be careful with who you trust with this information. Like in terms of who do you appoint as a sheikh, in the sense that he's also evaluating you. Now, our teachers inevitably will see things in us that we don't see. And because they have that knowledge, that experience, they can definitely help us. I've done this, especially when I was younger. Man, subhanAllah, some of the best advice I ever got always was from my teachers, our mashayikh, when they would give us advice, etc. But we have to be careful as well that this can be exploited. Anyways, inshallah ta'ala, we'll stop here. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Any issues? Yeah. Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Deviating from the sunnah. So if somebody gives you advice and it goes against the sunnah, then this is clear. Unless they have a reasoning why, it doesn't. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't make a lot of sense. 100%. Yeah, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, gosh. Yeah. Are we inclusive of? عند الله أتقاكم. Uh-huh. It should, if we have that. So, does taqwa cover the external and internal kind of characteristics that we should have? Theoretically, yes, it should. Practically, taqwa is, if we don't properly define it for people, they don't know what we're talking about, right? And they won't know that it actually encompasses husn al-khuluq. All of this, by the way, is taken from the hadith that Mu'adh actually narrates, right? Where he says, اتق الله حيثما كنت. Have the taqwa of Allah wherever you may be. And then he says, وَخَالِقِ النَّاسِ بِخُلُقٍ حَسَنٍ. And behave with people in good behavior, right? I'm sorry, it says, وَأَتْبِعِ السَّيِّئَةَ الْحَسَنَةَ تَمْحُهَا. That we follow up a bad deed with a good deed, it will erase it. And then behave with people good behavior. Why? Because character is a part of taqwa. It is. And that's why they're mentioned in that same hadith. But there's so many aspects to taqwa, that's why we're kind of breaking it down. But yes, you're right. If a person does have the taqwa ultimately, yes. Yes. In our taqwa. Sorry. Yeah. Or much more stronger in our iman. Yeah. Inshallah. No. Yes. Yes. Uh-huh. Is the body. Yeah. Yes. You're naked. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Uh-huh. Sorry. Yes. Yes. And they will cover up your flaws. You know, just like clothes cover up our flaw, good behavior covers up. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Sire. Yep. Jazakallah khair. Barakallah fikum. Jazakallah khairan. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll be here next Monday, inshallah ta'ala. Yeah, yeah. Don't worry, no, it was in the contract. I had it. Is it? Yeah. Yeah, yeah, inshallah. Yeah, yeah, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. Barakallah fikum. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.